A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms has a refreshingly traditional set of values: kindness, honor, courage, friendship, in a word, chivalry. And that is 100% the key to its current success among both critics and audiences, but it may be a key factor in long-term success, as in ending well. And if you know anything about the HBO Game of Thrones shows and its spinoff, you know that that is not something that these have a tendency to do. I want to explain why the values of a story matter, and why not having clear ones is what doomed Game of Thrones and is on track to complicating House of the Dragon, to say the least. I think we've deceived ourselves nowadays into thinking that complexity only arises from challenging or critiquing or attacking traditional values and standards. Something is only profound if it subverts, which is BS. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms deals with another kind of complexity. Do you have what it takes to be good in a world that is so often gunning against goodness? That might be simpler. You're not questioning constantly what is good, but you're asking, how do I do what is good? And that's not easier. The show is about a man's struggle to be just in the face of evil and his own inadequacies, about how the individual has to interact with morality and the world around him. But if you're watching this video, you probably know all of this, you've seen this praise. If you haven't seen the show yourself, you are not being deceived. The show is, it's the best thing ever, actually. I don't want to go on and on about it. There have been enough reviews talking about it, but yeah, it's great. All of those traditional values have the benefit of being both true and good. And that has the added bonus of, from a writing perspective, giving the show a clear, coherent, philosophical backbone. And that is something even the most basic story needs to really land the plane, as it were. Many reasons have been given as to why the HBO adaptations of George R.R. Martin's novels and tie-ins have a tendency to go sour. The biggest one people always talk about is straying away from the source material for any number of reasons. People say that Game of Thrones ran out of novels to adapt, but that's not exactly true, as the lore YouTubers have been trying to explain for years. There were huge characters and plot lines from the relatively latest two novels that were just dropped. They're left on the cutting room floor. And as for House of the Dragon, who knows what they're doing. But as I said, what I want to talk about is how a lack of clear values is why those shows haven't ended well, and why Knight of the Seven Kingdoms from the get-go stands a much better chance. Stories, in some way, are working out ideas as much as they are working out plots and characters. And just like a story has to make the plot and the characters land well, the ideas have to come to a satisfying conclusion. And that word, I keep saying, satisfying, I'm being very specific with it. A satisfying ending can be happy or sad or in between. Revenge of the Sith has a pretty bleak ending, but it's satisfying, because you know the story got across what it wanted to say. Lord of the Rings has a pretty bittersweet ending, but it's satisfying. And The Hobbit, or the original trilogy, have a happy ending, and those are satisfying. So I'm not against what Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon are trying to do, which is tell a story that reflects how history often goes, which isn't great. Besides being fantasy, action, and prestige dialogue shows, they're meant to be deconstructions and challenges of traditional values. Once again, not theoretically a bad thing. Fiction has always challenged and reconsidered the values of its time. The problem is that in the rage of deconstruction, of critique, these shows actually don't know what they're trying to say. They only know what they're trying to attack. And so they don't know what to be, and so then they just fall over themselves. Game of Thrones, of course, is based on the A Song of Ice and Fire novels, which are specifically deconstructing the traditional tropes and values of medieval and Tolkien-inspired fantasy stories. It points out pretty brutally how simple traditional heroism fares against the mechanics of politics, and then there's all the normal critiques of well, powerful people are bad. That's crazy. You get this sophisticated dialogue about how you don't
fight with honor.
You don't fight with honor.
He did.
No. He did.
Power resides where
Power
men
resides where
believe
men believe
it resides.
It's great dialogue, and yes, there's truth to it, right? Power does have this illusory quality. It's kind of fake in some ways. However, Varys, you are saying that in a world in which power also definitely resides, at least in part, in
Lord, cast your light upon this man.
nothing is real, and it's just the system, and you should be cynical about all of it. And also the Targaryens have a genetic predisposition to dragon riding, and some people are magic skin changers, and you can go back in time. It's a problem in the books for me a little bit as well. There's such a cynicism about the great houses and religion and things like that. But then people absolutely do appear as their house symbols in the very real dreams and prophecies throughout the story. Ultimately, you get the silly, Schrodinger's, I don't know, Power is an illusion when the show wants to be deep, and very real when the show wants to be cool. But as I think I've said, that's not a problem in theory. At least it wouldn't be if Game of Thrones had something to say about this apparent contradiction. Because yeah, there's truth to both. There is this element where power is fake and kind of showmanship, but there's another element of life that there are forces and inequalities in the world that we don't get to control. There's a version of the show that makes that the point, and I think there are answers to be found. And actually, I think at Night of the Seven Kingdoms gets at that answer. But Game of Thrones, it's less interesting, but it could have been more coherent. Could have just picked one. Just tell a story where power isn't real. Power is an illusion. Make that point. Or tell the story where power is very real. What do you do about that? Instead, the show chooses a secret third thing: hype and aura. By probably around season 6, the show had just run out of things to say. It's been said over and over again that the showrunners just weren't smart enough to write the characters, but they also weren't wise enough to know what they wanted to say here. Now, House of the Dragon is trying harder to say something. It wants to be like a feminist anti-war think piece. However, it's stupid. Now, there's a lot of great stuff in House of the Dragon. Season 1 is great. I'd say the first 4 episodes of Season 2 are great. And then the other 4 episodes have great stuff sprinkled in. But it all gets screwed up by this one overriding principle that it has, which is woman good. And it doesn't even know what that means. Because just like Game of Thrones, where sometimes it wants to say one thing and sometimes it rides on saying the other, sometimes women good means women are just as capable as men, and other times it means women are always morally upright. And in a story about how the beef between 2 women spiraled into nuclear war, that you can't do that. Now, of course, there were other factors that made especially season 2 a mess. There's the writer's strike, and there are these weird studio side issues about like the length of the season and whatever. Fine. But the show keeps trying to absolve all its female characters from all blame for anything ever. And so ultimately undercut whatever point you're trying to make about women, because you're not letting them be the center of a great story. You're trying to protect them too much. You just gotta like take off the training wheels and let them fall. And then just on like a story mechanics level, that's not how the source material was written. And then the writers don't accommodate for the changes that they've made, and then the show stalls and it falls flat. Either women have the agency to be just as evil or just as heroic as men, or they're perfect and every problem would be solved if we just listened to them. And if that last point is what the show is saying, then that is just not true, and therefore it's not good, and so it's not saying anything. If the show got rid of this feminist beam in its eye, it might be able to be about the horrors of war and the tragedy of politics and prejudice, the destroyed friendships and the difficulties of family. Once again, those ideas are there. There's so much good stuff in the show, but it's being dragged down by the showrunners' inability to work out these ideas for themselves, and therefore inability to put it on the page. And in conclusion, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, it's simpler, it's humbler, but it has a moral confidence. And that's really what makes it work. You know what's good. Like, it's fun to think about, like, the moral complexity of everything, but ultimately you know what's good, right? And the show knows you know what's good. And so it can be about doing good. As I said earlier, I think this show addresses what do you do about power, what Game of Thrones ultimately should be about. The fact that power is kind of fake, but it is kind of real. And it's ultimately whatever power you have, you use it to serve others for the good. You serve those weaker than yourselves. You're never going to be able to get away from the inequalities of everything. Baelor Targaryen will always have more power than Dunk. Dunk is always going to be big and strong and whatever, but it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, they're both interested in protecting the innocent. And I think that's a great answer. So I'm glad one of these HBO shows has figured it out and are willing to just go all the way with it. But ultimately, I would love to know what you think, so please let me know down in the comments below. And while you're there, please like, subscribe. It all really helps grow the channel, and I really enjoy having these discussions. So thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. God bless.